Hello.
Hello, hello, Polly.
Hi Luke, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for taking your time to do this with me. I really appreciate it.
Good. It's all good.
Lovely. Well, I just have a few questions for you. Your up and coming album coming out. Um, and we'll just get straight into it, if that's all right.
Yeah,
Yeah?
absolutely.
Amazing. So, Love Will Probably Kill Me Before Cigarettes and Wine, which is a great title, by the way.
Thank
Um,
you.
what inspired you to do this solo album? How's that transition been, and how does it differ from your work with the Struts? What's that process been like for you?
It's a very good question. I think I was really inspired when it was really kind of during the lockdown. Not the initial sort of like first phase, but there was a moment where I relocated from LA and I came back to Devon, where like my family live. Um, and I ended up like renting this cottage in the countryside, and I just sort of like began to really self-reflect in terms of my career up until that point and the my musical legacy, for instance. And I was just incredibly moved to create something that was um, purely about my experiences with my relationships,
Mm,
and to be more specific, like more about love and heartbreak. And I thought it would be a really great thing to do to create a whole album like that and not deviate from the subject matter.
yeah,
And then these songs just started really kind of falling out of me, and I felt really, really good about them. And I think the difference between the, I guess like the band stuff versus my own approach would be, I think there's kind of like a level of expectation when it
yeah,
comes to all Struts music,
mm,
which isn't lost on me, and that's totally fine. But what I was really excited about was that I kind of saw this as kind of a blank page
yeah,
where I could reinvent myself to a degree, and and kind of really showcase the person that I've grown up to become,
mm,
and kind of in some ways kind of ditch the persona and the image that I've kind of carried with me and developed obviously myself for like the last 10 plus years. So I think what people will sort of see and hear is probably the most authentic and honest version of myself in this music. So I think that's kind of the biggest difference.
a lot like a more stripped back kind of approach to you, I guess. Bit more.
Yeah, completely. And really sort of making sure that the vocals and my lyrics were center stage,
Yeah,
and not having to worry about all of the other external things that come with being in a group. Um,
yeah,
and it was a really great exercise. It was really inspiring, and to be honest, I kind of needed to do it. It was like it'd been something that I'd wanted to do for a while, but had never found the proper moment in time. But once the Struts had done their fourth album, I felt like it was the right time, and I didn't feel like it was inappropriate. I think it's quite clear to see like where my loyalties like lie, regardless of anyone sort
yeah.
of like speculating.
Mm.
Um, but no, it feels good to do it.
Yeah, and I imagine it was a lot quite therapeutic almost, introspective and reflective, like you said. I think the countryside does that as well, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely,
It
absolutely.
clears what might have been a bit foggy before. It really calms down everything. That's how I feel about it anyway. Um, So, you said this is, a bit more personal, a bit more you. How did you approach the songwriting, compared to working with a band, and how did that approach to it differ, the creative process and really getting those words down and the music behind it? How did that differ from working with the band?
Well, I think quite simply, it was it's kind of like this. The music that features on the solo record is has been a let's call it a genre or feel of music that has become quite natural for me to sit down and create. Um, because I've kind of, I've changed as a person and I've lived a lot more life and I feel like I can genuinely pull from my own experiences more so than I have done in the past. So there was that side of it where I wasn't worried, like if I was to sit down and create a sort of ballad or something that I felt should be just myself and piano. And I think with a group setting, you can have those moments as a writer, but you are in the back of your head, sort of like at the mercy of the expectation of being in a group, and it's like you can take this really delicate idea, and sometimes what will happen is people will be like, well, where's the what's the guitar going to do? Like, are we going to add big drums to this, etc.? So there was none of that, which proved to sort of help create a very consistent, clear vision for the group, for the album. And another big difference was I I was kind of writing backwards, which is something that I've continued to do ever since, where I really would take a great deal of time to write like five or six stanzas of a verse,
Mm,
for instance, or poetry,
yeah.
whatever you want to call it. I just kind of call it fancy lyrics. And I would get it to a place that I could sort of read it like poetry and it would sound and feel good coming off the tongue and all those kind of things. And they all painted like a really good picture in one's mind.
Mm,
And it was after I'd done that where I would then approach it again once I'd sort of lived with it for a while, and I would just sort of sit down at the piano and say like, okay, well, what would the music sound like with this kind of lyric? And that was sort of like the genesis or the nucleus, so to speak, for a lot of the songs. It was poetry first, concept, and then I would sort of then write music to it. So it
really
was it was a
interesting.
very big difference.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's almost like spoken word into songs, into an album.
Exactly. It's exactly how Elton John and his writing partner Bernie would
Mm.
write, except I didn't have a Bernie. I was
Yeah.
just sort of
Just
like
you.
I was kind of doing it myself. So yeah, it was a really powerful and effective way to do it.
And I suppose if you use that process, you're sitting with those words, you're sitting with the lyrics a lot longer. Did that make
Mm.
you, did you go back and forth with the words more than you maybe thought you would have, or you maybe have in the past, or was it kind of a natural progression for you?
Yeah, you're right. I had a lot more time
Mm.
because I was sort of chipping away at all of these songs um, in between touring, in between writing for the Struts. So I had the advantage of living with something for a minute, and if there was something that I felt like could be better or said clearer, then I could sort of just easily go back and rewrite and everything. So there's a level of attention to this music that I haven't been able to do since I guess in many ways like the Struts debut album, where you kind of have your whole life to kind of write
Yeah.
it. And then you just got to keep going and keep
Yeah.
moving. But yeah, I'm really proud and if I'm completely honest, I can stand by this record and say I think it's some of my best lyrical content on an entire album consistently than I've ever done before.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, it is beautiful, and what what I would be interested to know is what have been your influences coming
Mm.
to writing this specific album? Are there any maybe unexpected influences or genres that you've explored? You know, you've spoken about, writing the words first almost as a poem or a piece of spoken word. Are there any poets that maybe you've gone, I like the way they've, written that? Any unexpected influences that maybe people might be surprised to hear from you?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, one of the things that I found very fascinating was when I was beginning to sort of like create this idea of presenting myself as a solo
Mm.
artist, and I thought to myself like, okay, I sort of had a look around to see who else was sort of out there. And there was like Harry Styles, you had like Steven Sanchez and Lewis Capaldi, for instance. There are quite a few out there. Um, but one thing that struck me was like a lot of the male artists, in my opinion, are not really saying a huge amount compared to a lot of their female contemporaries. And I began to really become inspired by Adele and her sort of narrative storytelling in her lyrics, and Lana Del Rey even more. And I sort of thought to myself, like, why isn't there anyone sort of out there that's sort of like doing anything like that, but like from a male's perspective?
Yeah.
So I got really inspired by that. So those two artists in particular, I really took a huge amount of inspiration from, in terms of like the way that they really sort of wore their hearts on their sleeve and would speak about things that would probably be quite difficult to talk about. And I guess on sonically, on a musical level, I was really influenced by the first kind of three or four albums by an artist named Scott Walker,
Okay.
who's kind of like a cult. He has like a bit of a cult following in terms of he had quite a lot of success in the 60s, and he's a very interesting character with a really beautiful voice. But he would always write these beautiful songs that had such lush string arrangements, and that really inspired me to sort of like create a record that was very string heavy
Yeah.
and use the strings to enhance the lyrical content and make it even more emotive.
Mm. I really like that. Yeah, I think there is something about, female solo artists in particular, like you said, Adele, Lana Del Rey, those kind of artists that do bring a vulnerability to their music. And that's really interesting that you say you leant more towards like those female artists. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And I wouldn't have expected that for sure. Um,
Yeah.
so how do you think, you've worked on this solo album and it's been, I think, probably quite a process and a fair amount of time coming. How has this process maybe influenced or shifted maybe your perspective on the future of the Struts music and maybe how you might come to approach that in the future with the band? Or has it? It might not have. It might be two completely different entities in itself.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, if I'm completely honest, there's a huge part of me that in many ways, after being in the group for 10 years or so, I've it's nothing personal on anyone as individuals in the group. It's nothing personal on the fans. I think it's just the simple fact of, in a lot of ways, I've kind of grown out of a lot of the things that I really aspired and wanted to do, even 5 years ago.
Mm,
And that also includes music. I mean, I've always enjoyed a lot of music, not just like bands and artists that exist in the rock genre. And I sort of really explored that on this album. But in terms of like the future of like the group, I mean, for instance, I'm already working on the Struts fifth album at the moment. We have some really, really great stuff
yeah,
in the works. But I'm also equally as inspired to continue my solo efforts and give myself a place and a platform where if I feel really inspired to write from the heart and some songs that, might not be sort of in your face, energetic,
absolutely.
big rock songs, I can sort of have somewhere where I can actually really be myself as an individual and continue to put things out that I can stand by and be super proud. And in terms of the band, it's just a different dynamic. It's like there are three other people and we all have sort of different levels of expectation of what we want to achieve
Yeah,
musically,
absolutely.
etc.
I can imagine different influences as well and different experiences,
Yeah, yeah,
different types.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think yeah, like you say, you grow out and you go into different avenues in your life. I think that's natural progression, as you grow and talking about that kind of those two dynamics that you have both with the Struts and on your own, you've always had quite a theatrical presence with the Struts. How can you imagine that kind of shifting, when it comes to playing your solo music, live to crowds? How can we expect that maybe to carry over, or does it not? Are those going to be staying separate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think they are two separate worlds, and in
Yeah,
terms of the approach to the performances, I still really love getting up and performing in
absolutely.
front of in front of the fans with some good, energetic rock stuff. I love that. But what I also adore about my own stuff is I can really let the music do the talking, and I feel like when it comes to like a strut show, there's this need to run around like super
Yeah,
energetically and get everybody involved from the absolute get-go.
absolutely.
And with the shows that I've done for this solo material, whether it's in LA or wherever it's been so far, it's more to do with the songs themselves, and it's about the storytelling, and it's about the music and my voice, because that's the sort of like audience that attend the kind of gig. They want to sort of live and breathe the song,
Mm,
rather than like when you go to a Struts concert, it's like people want to let loose and they want to have a good time. I mean, the Struts in many ways is the quintessential party band,
yeah.
and that's really great. That's amazing. Um, I just think it's really cool that I can now, for the first time in my life, like just have a different way of doing something.
I can imagine it's almost a bit of breath of fresh air, that kind of
Mm.
sigh into it. And, I've spoken to, a few artists and a few bands, and they've said, the best thing about live music and playing to your own audience is it's not just about you being on stage, or it's not just about the audience watching it, the shared experience. And I can imagine
Mm,
those shared experiences with the Struts and with, you on your own and your solo music are very different, very
mm.
different experiences. And it must be quite nice to have that two sides of the same coin,
Oh,
almost.
absolutely. It's almost like you got to have one in order to appreciate
The other.
the other, and I think that's also why I needed to do it because there have been a lot of moments where I've been so like uninspired and so like disenchanted with like the rock genre and constantly having to like meet um sort of like other people's expectations in
Yeah.
terms of like the things that I create. So
Hmm.
it's nice now that I can do this and get that off my chest and then by the time it's done, it's a lot healthier now. I can sort of then approach and become genuinely inspired to sort of like
Absolutely.
do this other side, you know?
I think that's a lot of what it takes to be an artist in any avenue, I'm a photographer and I love what I do. I love shooting live music, I love shooting events, and but it's so nice to come out of that and do something different, do something
Mm,
that's mine that I don't have to share, that I don't have to tailor to fit something. And I think
mm,
it is definitely like I agree, it's healthy to have that balance, do everything that you love, but in two very different ways to have that balance. And
yeah.
you know, the Struts and your solo music, it is definitely a balance because they are different. And I think people, I think people will receive that as it is, as a balance, as two separate things. Uh,
Mm.
I can imagine it's been, very different, very eye-opening. Have there been any challenges that you faced whilst, going down the solo route and stepping out on your own for this particular project?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been such a huge learning experience. I mean, and I've spoken about it before, but when I say labor of love, I mean it was such a labor of love, whether it was taking the time in between all of my other priorities and life to sort of continue and stay motivated to write and record these songs.
Hmm.
And then, of course, once I had my own deal carved out, for instance, it was then a case of getting them to the finish line. I mean, even the organization of getting the strings
Yeah.
recorded for all of the songs. I mean, that was just a huge thing in itself. And then I've also shot 10 music videos for the 10 songs on the album, and I've been doing that for the last year and a half.
Wow.
Um, in my own free time with my own money and that's also has its own challenges
Yeah.
but it's great. I wouldn't have changed anything for the world and I think I've learned an awful lot from it and I'm ready to do more. I'm inspired to do more um and even sort of apply some of the things that I've learned into the group setting as well if it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, the album as a whole, if you were to maybe recommend just one song for someone to listen to straight off the bat, you're picking one out of the 10. What do you think you would recommend and why? Do you have a favorite? Do you have one that really hits in your chest?
Wow, great question.
Hard-hitting questions here.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of my favorite moments right now. is She's Just Like California on
Mhm.
the record. And I think in many ways, sentimentally, it's a real moment for me. I mean, that song is probably the oldest of the ideas that
Mm.
would become songs by a country mile. Um, and I sort of had it for a very, very long time. And I always sort of thought it was too simple. And, I there was moments where I tried to sort of like injecting it into the struts, so to speak, but it never sort of worked or felt completely right. And funny enough, I actually ended up writing two different versions of the same song.
Okay.
And I had another version of She's Just Like California, which was a reworked version that I thought was more exciting and was more cohesive with the rest of the album. And it was actually my mum and my little sister that thought I'd completely ruined the song. And I was so confused. And they then asked me to get the original demo out that I did on my laptop, and then that was the version that they were like, "Yes, this is it, this is it." And I was like, "Oh gosh!" And I was like, "Yeah, but it's too simple, blah blah blah." So I actually went away and sort of tweaked some of the lyrics to sort of make it flow even more as it kept coming back to the choruses. And by the end of it, I was like, "Wow, my mum and my sister were right. This is actually a really superior version." So then I ended up going back to LA as soon as I could, and I got into the studio, and it was the last song that I recorded for the album.
Mm.
And it's also the black sheep of the
Okay.
record. It's the only song that doesn't have huge strings, and it's like it it acts as a bit of a palate cleanser.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's the most unique moment, and it's also really beautiful as well. And I'm really proud of it.
It almost sounds like it bookended this process for you as well.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And that's the ironic thing. It was one of the first songs
Yeah.
that I ever considered would be a solo effort. Um, and then it was also the last song that was actually made the record. So yeah, it's kind of poetic in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that. That's a great recommendation. I love that your mum and your sister were that kind of push that you needed.
Yeah, yeah, they're my greatest critics, honestly. They
I think
really
they
are.
always are. Family always are. But that's,
Yeah.
why we have them around for sure. Um, so you've worked with some pretty phenomenal musicians, some legendary musicians, some might say. Who who do you think your dream collaboration, who is still on that bucket list for you to work with in the future if you could choose?
Mm. I'd love to do something with like an artist like Elton John. He was really like one of the last true great songwriters from his sort of era. Uh, I love a band called The Libertines in the
Oh yeah,
UK,
absolutely.
and I've always been such a big fan of Peter and Carl's writing, and I'd love to do something with either of them one day. That'd be incredible. And I think this kind of music sort of lends itself to different artists that, if I was given the opportunity, I'd love to take out on the road and, play shows for, some of the female artists that I mentioned, and even some of the male ones as well. But yeah, I'd have to say sort of, those kind of people, Um, who knows? Who knows?
Who knows what the future holds? Absolutely. And so would Elton John be on your kind of, if you had to have a dinner with any rock star, past, present, or future, would he be on that list for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think he'd probably have so many incredible stories. Well, I know so. He's gonna have some great stories, and I hear that he's actually a very agreeable, like nice chap. So I think meeting someone like that wouldn't disappoint. Um, and
Anyone
yeah, I think anyone else
past, present, or future?
or future.
Yeah.
Um,
Any up and coming artists that you'd want to sit down with that you think they're gonna make it?
that's a very good question. It's a very good question. I'm actually going to be meeting my friend Spencer Sutherland pretty soon. I'm going to go and play a song at his show. He's a really great guy.
Want
And
to
and
keep
is
an eye
really,
out for them.
yeah, yeah. And who else? Who else is on my radar? There's an amazing Italian artist um that I like. Let me just get his name up.
Absolutely.
Lucio Corsi. I don't know if that's how I'm saying it, but it's Lucio Corsi. And I discovered him probably about a month or so ago. I don't know how well his English is, but if it's sort of like my Italian, then we may just sort of have to communicate through facial expressions and whatnot. But I really, really think he's an incredible artist, and I think he has an amazing future. And I'd love to work with him, um, and actually have dinner. Actually, we could write a song and eat, you know?
Lovely. That sounds like a great night. I don't know if you could maybe tell mine would be David Bowie.
Oh, Bowie, wow. Yeah,
Tell.
I've actually been doing a lot of shows with his piano player.
How amazing.
Who is a great guy, a guy called Mike Garson, who did 20 albums with him and 500 performances while David was still alive. So he's had some incredible stories.
Oh, I can only imagine. That's amazing. Well, we don't. I'm coming to the end of my questions now. I have one more for you, and I
Mhm.
ask this to everyone that I speak to. Um, and you can give me a serious answer or a silly answer. I've had both. But what is one of the best pieces of advice that you've been given? And that could be to do with your music, or it could just be advice in general that you would pass on to someone.
You know what? I would say what my dad always tells me, and that is enjoy the ride.
I love
And what, just to sort of expand on that, if it isn't self-explanatory for anyone who's watching or listening, it's like it's very easy to be caught up with where someone wants to be and where you see your career or your love life or your life in general being in order to finally be happy.
Mm.
And I think the truth of the matter is that never fully comes. And the only way in which you can actually truly sort of arrive close to that point is actually enjoying the journey and taking the highs and the lows in their stride and finding strength and inspiration on those days and moments where you're sort of struggling um, or remaining completely uninspired and and enjoying the ride is the most important aspect of that. It's the journey. It's the journey. It's never really the destination.
Absolutely, I love that. Thank you so much for taking
Thank you.
time out of your day to chat with me for Rock News. For the people watching and listening, do let them know when your album is coming out and where they can find it.
My album, Love Will Probably Kill Me Before Cigarettes and Wine, is available worldwide, physically on CD, via lukespiller.com. You can order it there. And of course, it will be out on all streaming platforms on April the 25th. And of course, don't forget to check out all the videos as well that will be coming and dripping throughout the rest of the year on my YouTube channel, Luke Spiller Music.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Luke. I really appreciate it. I've loved chatting with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you very much for having me.
Always. Thank you very much. You
Thank
have
you.
a
Bye.
good evening. Bye bye.
Bye.